OTAs are no more. Mandatory minicamp next on the horizon. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. Matt Bove, Sal Capaccio joining you here following the Bills' final OTA practice. Well, final OTA practice that's open to reporters. And then next week, we're already back there for mandatory minicamp. Then there's about a month off until training camp starts. But Sal, 3 weeks of OTAs, 3 weeks of watching full practices, 3 weeks of new players, new coaches, a lot of different layers to all of it. What stands out from OTAs? Anything jump off the page immediately for you?
Yeah, first thing I want to say that I am in the same boat as you when I say last OTA, and then I catch myself and saying, wait a minute, there's actually
For
one more.
us.
They are going to be on the field on Thursday, June
Mhm.
6th, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, but we only are out there on Tuesdays as part of the media. What has stood out to me? Um, yeah, I think a guy that has stood out is DeMar Hamlin. I think he's making plays, right? I mean, and
Yeah.
it's got to be noteworthy. And I know DeMar has been a average safety at best when he's played. I know that he hasn't really been a guy that you'd want to rely on to be on the field much. He's been a special teams player, and of course, we know what happened, a couple of years ago in Cincinnati and everything that unfolded, and then into last year. But the guy's made plays, and I think it's noteworthy, for him in his fourth year that he's making some plays in these OTAs. It doesn't mean it's going to translate, once it comes regular season. But I do think it's overall about the secondary. I'm noticing the secondary and DeMar Hamlin. It's not Jordan Poyer. It's not Micah Hyde. Mike
Mhm.
Edwards is out there, but he's hurt. He's not. He's dealing with a shoulder injury, he's recovering, so he's not doing any teamwork. He is out there. We see him. Taylor Rapp is out there. So the overhaul of the secondary, and obviously Cole Bishop and injecting him in there. That's something that I've noticed a little bit here. We're talking about new players. We're watching new players. The other thing that's been noteworthy for me is I don't want to sound any alarm bells because next week we'll know, but it doesn't feel like there's anything to be sounded. Rasul Douglas is the only player that has been yet to be spotted by us or that we know is rehabbing in some capacity. He's the only player that through three OTA practices that the media has been able to watch that we can say is basically unaccounted for.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything. Once again, it's nothing until it's something. So if for some reason he's not there at mandatory minicamp, then it's very much
Mhm.
something. But I also think back to the Bills reworking money on his contract a few months ago. So it feels like the relationship there is fine and that everybody is on the same page. He probably just thinks like, listen, I joined this team halfway through the season last year and I had some success. I'm going to go when I have to go. I'll be there for mandatory minicamp. I'll be there for training camp. That's just kind of been my read on it this whole time. But I do want to ask you, because you brought up Damar Hamlin. When you said, I don't want to sound any alarms, I thought you were going to say, I don't want to sound any alarms, but the offense has clearly been a step behind in most of the practice sessions that we have seen. Now, do you think there's anything to that? Because I know they always say, well, like defense is ahead,
Um,
but it does
I don't know if I
feel
agree that
for
it's been most of the practices. It certainly was today. It was definitely the defense dominated the last day of practice that we watched
Mhm.
from a standpoint of they made far more plays. I thought the first, I don't know if it was the first or second week, the offense definitely had more plays one of those weeks and maybe more even. So I think it's kind of been like a little bit like a heavyweight fight where you've had your
Mhm.
share and they've had their share. So I don't think that it's been heavily dominated by the defense or the offense has been a little bit slower. And yes, as you just referred to it, and I said in my article today at WGR550.com, we know the old saying, defense is always ahead of the offense. And why is that? Let's
Sure.
talk about why that is, which is, and I think it is underscored by this team. Here's the theory. All right, everybody. On offense, you have 11 people who have to perform in sync. If one person doesn't do their job, it could really blow up the whole play. You need
Mhm.
the offensive line to really kind of understand, know where the blocking schemes are. You have to gel. There's a lot of people thinking about a lot of things that have to come together at the same time. Not that you're not like that on defense. You have a system, but all it takes on defense is for one person to make a play. Even if they're out of position, they can hustle and make a play on defense,
Uh-huh.
really. So that's why defense is generally ahead of the offense because the defense can kind of make mistakes and get away with it a little bit more, where the offense
Mhm.
really can't, especially when you're trying to gel. And this offense has a lot of new parts. There's no Stephon Diggs. There's no Gabe Davis.
Basically the
There is
whole
a
thing.
Keon Coleman. There is a Curtis Samuel. And, you have different part, even the offensive line, Connor McGovern and him playing center. So yes, I think that we saw that on Tuesday, the last day of June 4th. I'd also say that Josh Allen, that could very well be the reason, but he did not have his best day that day. And
Mhm.
to me, maybe that is some miscommunication. He threw a couple balls that I seemed like, well, who's he
Bad.
throwing it to? It
Bad.
seemed like it was more
Mhm.
to the defender than it was to the receiver. And that could simply be what we're talking about here with the miscommunication.
Yeah, I think those are communication things more than they are bad decision makings or even just bad throws that are just like, oh, a little bit off. I just think that they look out of sync, which is to be
Yep.
expected. You said you think it's a little bit closer. I remember day one of OTAs that we were there. It felt maybe slight advantage offense. It felt like today, June 4th, was just domination of the defense.
Yes.
And then the middle one, week two, I still thought leaned a little bit more towards the defense. But I mean, either way, I'm not overly
That was the
concerned.
one, by the way, and I agree with you. It was, but remember that was the one where they did a lot of short passes. So the
Yeah.
short passing game is what they really highlighted. So I don't know how much you can get from it, but I agree. The defense probably had the better day that day. That's the day that
Mhm.
DeMar actually picked off Josh on a pass,
Yes.
where he jumped in front of a ball that was down the seam. So that happened, but they had some success. Now I also want to point out the offense had successful plays.
Yeah, a
On
couple.
Tuesday, there was a long pass from Trubisky to Chase Claypool down the middle, and Chase Claypool just got past defenders. There was another
Mhm.
one. Brian Thompson made a couple of really nice catches, one that would have been a touchdown. Josh came right back to Zach Davidson, of all people, after he wound up throwing the ball that got tipped by DeMar and turned back an interception by Deion Jones. So they had their share, but then you also add in the pressure and a couple of the times that the defense was in the backfield, and it definitely tilted towards their way.
Yeah, they were chirping too. I was over
Yep.
towards the sideline of where the defensive players were standing, and they were letting the offense have it. But I will say, a good sign in the right direction that on June 4th, in their last OTA practice, Spencer Brown was more involved with the football side of things than we have seen the first couple weeks. So that's a good sign. But most of the OTAs, there have been no Spencer Brown. There has been, because there's been no Spencer Brown, they've had to get a little bit more creative. Then you've got a new guard at David Edwards. You've got a new center at Connor McGovern. You have new wide receivers basically all over the place. And there was a week or two that James Cook wasn't there. So offensively, it felt like for a little bit they were playing with one hand tied behind their back. I'm not at all concerned because it is June 4th, but I do think that it will take them longer to get up to speed than it has in years past. I think that the advantage the defense has will be even greater for a longer period of time, if that makes any sense.
I do think it makes sense. It's good then that I don't want to be like talking smack here about the Arizona Cardinals, but it's good that they're playing a team that they should be better than week one, right? Maybe you get the kinks out that week one. Now that's what preseason's for. I get it. But how much you playing everybody in preseason, and you're going to have to try and find the right chemistry here. But maybe week one, you're not playing the Chiefs or the 49ers. Maybe it's a team and the Cardinals. If you don't have your A game, you can still kind of get by and you can kind of work those things out before a quick 4-day turnaround to playing the Miami Dolphins out at their place. Because I agree that might take, a little while. On defense, anybody else stand out to you about, how they play? We just talked about DeMar Hamlin. Is there anybody else that's kind of stood out or did something that, was noteworthy to you?
I have a random one. I
Okay.
want to get your take on this. Austin Johnson has popped a few times. Have you
Okay.
noticed him? I've just been watching a lot because, admittedly, I've been doing a story on Daquan Jones, so I've spent a little bit more time around the defensive line. Today, I wanted to see, okay, well, like, what's Von Miller doing? And just the last couple of weeks, because I was looking for him, maybe that's why he has popped to me. But Austin Johnson has felt like, they have a bigger plan for him. And actually, the interview I did with Daquan almost kind of backs this up because I said, like, how much recruiting did you have to do to get him here? And he said, well, there were several teams interested, but the familiarity with me, the culture fit that I told him about, those kind of checked a lot of boxes. Also, surprisingly enough, this is a question, not to get off track here, but I asked Daquan Jones, I was like, hey, man, from the outside looking in, it always felt like a foregone conclusion that you were just going to come back to Buffalo. Was that actually how it was? And he was like, I always thought I would come back until the process actually started. And then I got pretty worried. And it sounds like he had some pretty serious conversations with other teams. But the big thing that was bringing him back
Be surprised,
unfinished,
yeah.
unfinished business. And he said, like, listen, my goal for this year is to be an all pro. I thought I was playing at that level until I got hurt last year, which made it so difficult. And I think that
I
I
agree.
can do even more than that. So I would say I've noticed Austin Johnson. I've noticed DeMar Hamlin. I have noticed some other guys for not great reasons of like, oh, that guy has a lot to learn. But I also think that that's to be expected. I don't want to put too many people on blast here, but there's a couple rookies that, look like
Yeah.
rookies.
One guy that has jumped out to me, I promise I'm not saying this just because he went to Syracuse, but Kingsley Jonathan, I thought, has made a few plays at
Mhm.
defensive end. He actually batted down a pass, I believe. I believe it was him. I tried to get it, and I thought it was him. I could be wrong. He was right in there on Tuesday. We saw. Then he got in the backfield a little bit later. He's always been a guy actually that's had pretty good numbers as far as amount of efficiency on the field and doing some things. That's a really interesting spot. You talk about Daquan Jones. By the way, shameless plug for you. It's okay. You did a one-on-one with him, right?
Yeah,
WKBW.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
you got
Mhm.
a one-on-one. That was really great. And people can hear that Matt did. But you talk about this defensive end group, this defensive tackle group, the whole defensive line altogether. I think there's a lot of concern there, Matt. If I said what's a concern for Bills fans, you'd say, well, defensive line, especially edge. But I do think that they might have some pretty quality depth that could make up for maybe the high end that they might be missing unless Von Miller can really pop. Might be missing that at end. But I'm looking at this defensive tackle group. You just brought it up, right? You got Daquan Jones with Ed Oliver and Austin Johnson. They draft Wayne Carter, who I think is going to be a heavy part of the rotation. Deshaun Williams has put time in this league. And I think Elianku can even play in the NFL. He's been around a while. He's been on a couple of teams, the Bills practice squad, but I think their depth is okay there.
I think their depth is okay, but they need another guy. And this might be a natural way of getting into the salary cap conversation, but I still think that with the money they have, it makes the most sense to use it on another defensive lineman. I would say right now, the betting odds would have to feel like defensive end or edge rusher is where they should be going with that money, just because, like you said, sure, Kingsley Jonathan has flashed at times, but how much are you trusting Kingsley Jonathan if he is your, let's say, fourth guy, right? I don't know the answer to that question because right now it's going to be Greg Rousseau. I have no idea what to expect from Von Miller. And I don't know if AJ Epinesa is ready to go from a 6.5 sack guy on a rotation to an 8 sack guy. Like, I know there's not a Leonard Floyd out there, but is there something close? And is that where they should be using the money that they have?
Well, listen, all right, so let's talk about that. Let's go to the defensive end group and defensive line group and this salary cap overall. And we'll kind of talk about here on It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. The Bills signed Leonard Floyd last year later in the process.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see anybody like Leonard Floyd out there right now. Let me give you some names, all right? Because here's the issue with how we're talking about if they want to go out and get somebody. I don't disagree with you, Matt, that maybe that's the one area.
I have two names too, so I
Okay.
think that
And
you're going to
you
probably
stop
them.
me if these are any of them. Emmanuel Ogba,
Okay, no.
Yannick Ngakoue,
One is
Carl
one of the
Lawson.
Two. Those are the two.
Yep. I think Carl Lawson to me would be number one in that list. Jerry Hughes still out there. We know that he's played for the Bills. He's obviously older. Charles Harris, Tyus Bowser, Marquise Haynes, Rasheem Green, Marcus Golden, and Shaq Lawson still out there, by the way. Now I'm also I want everybody to know this is a list from sharpfootball.com, sharpfootballanalysis.com for Warren Sharp. That's where I'm reading this from. So if anybody signed since he published this like a week ago till now, my apologies, but thank you to Warren Sharp, who always does an excellent job. And that's where I got this list from. Shaq's still an option. He's out there. Feels like maybe they just want to move on. And this is one of those guys that, hey, we're doing our new iteration here. We'll move on. I agree with you that Carl Lawson, to me, could be a guy that you'd want to look at here. But what does Carl Lawson bring to the table at this point? I'm not really sure. Take a look at him right now. He's what? He's still pretty young. He's only 28 years old.
0 sacks last year.
Right.
0 sacks.
But he had 7 2 years ago.
But
when he was
that's
playing
why
3-4 and playing more linebacker level, I think, in rushing from like a hybrid spot.
Well, that's why I think you're buying at the lowest point with Carl Lawson. Carl Lawson is not Leonard Floyd where he eats up all of your remaining money. Carl Lawson is a couple $1 million. And I think that he is a better fit or has at least a higher ceiling than a Casey Toohill. Does he have a higher ceiling than a Javon Solomon as a rookie or as Kingsley Jonathan as like a third-year player? Maybe not, but why not take a flyer on a guy if you think that he does have a decently high ceiling and he is still a little bit younger? And then the other one is Yannick Ngakoue. He is just kind of like your ho-hum every year that guy gets a few sacks, right? Last year he had a down year. He had 4, but he has been a productive player in the league. If he's your third or fourth guy, I think you can feel fairly confident that you at least have some sort of rotation there. I think this is about, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Casey Toohill or Kingsley Jonathan make the team. I think that they should have to beat out somebody to make the team. And right now, there's really not other people that they have to beat out.
Yeah, I think that's where they would focus their money on. But at the same time, I don't think the money's burning a hole in their pocket. They're going to have to sign their draft class. That's going to eat up probably 2 to 3 million based on the top 51 rule where everybody falls, all of that. It's not going to be exorbitant.
Well, they did sign everybody. Right. Yeah, I was going to say that happened earlier. They signed everybody but Keon, and according to Spot Track, their top 51 right now is 9.4.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
How much cap space they have.
And once you sign Keon, they'll eat up a little bit more of that. So let's just say they have 8 and change. Okay.
8.5.
So let's say 8.5. It's operating money. It's also, I will tell you, just from conversations we both had with Brandon Bean over the years, they need to keep a slush fund available because they have injury replacement costs. Guys get hurt throughout the year. You have to make choices. There's actually some new practice squad stuff over the last few years of how guys have to count against the salary cap up and down the practice squad, how much, they are on the active roster and things like that. You have to keep that in mind. I don't think the Bills are necessarily earmarking that money for a free agent who's available right now. I would, though, say if one becomes available, and they could say, "Ooh, wait a minute, this guy's getting cut. Oh yeah, he didn't work out there. Their team's they're going to save money. We can jump on that." Or a trade becomes available. And let's also remember, Matt, injuries do happen. This could be a rainy day fund. That's the way I look at this money being spent.
I think that I'm somewhere in the middle. I think they're going to do a few things, but they'll still keep $4 million in their back pocket, just as, a little bit. So I think that they'll do something. I think what they'll do is I think they'll sign a veteran defensive end for a couple $1 million. And I think that they'll sign a veteran cornerback for a couple $1 million. I think those are going to be the two positions that they target, because the same thing we just said about defensive end is the question of, do they trust Kaiir Elam to be their number 3 cornerback? Because that is something they have valued in years past. Having Dane Jackson was a little bit of a luxury for them because they knew if we've got an injury, we still like Dane Jackson. I have no idea if they like Kaiir Elam because the evidence doesn't show us that they love the guy. So,
can I ask you this? Does it show you? I find this fascinating because I agree with you that they haven't played him, that evidence, but doesn't the evidence of what they didn't do this offseason show that they at least are trying everything they can to make this work? And if it doesn't, they're going to be left holding the bag going, what do we do? Because they never drafted over them and they never signed anybody.
Yeah, well, they didn't really have money to sign anybody else.
Matt, they have left him as their number 3 outside corner this year. They've done nothing different.
They should. They should trust a first-round pick to be their number 3 cornerback. They should. The question is that the right move? It's now or never, right? If they go spend money and get somebody to leapfrog him on the depth chart, it's probably not ever going to work out. Or at least it's not ever going to work out in Buffalo. It's not the perfect comparison because Cody Ford was a 2nd-round pick, but it'll almost feel a little bit like the Cody Ford thing where it just got dragged out and it didn't work. I don't know exactly how this will end. I do think that Kaiir Elam still has potential, and I still think that they need to give him an opportunity. It's just, can he make the most of the opportunity? And so far, I don't even want to say he hasn't, because there have been plays that he's had an interception in the playoffs in back-to-back seasons. So when he's been on the field, he has actually made plays. It's just all of the plays where he doesn't intercept the ball seem to be an issue. I'm a weirdo. I went back and watched a bunch of the Steelers game last week just because that drive that he gets the interception on that ends the drive in the end zone, he got beat on a Deontay Johnson play. He got a penalty on Deontay. He's just getting beat. He got run over by Pat Freiermuth 2 plays earlier on a 3rd and 5 where he just gets run over. And you're like, he is really killing them. And then they target him in the end zone. He makes an interception. And it's like, what is going on? But I don't know. I still, wouldn't you say, though, that cornerback has to be the number 2 position that they would address?
Overall on the roster?
Yeah,
I think you're right. Depth corner. I mean, we know who the starting 3 are. Russell Douglas, Christian Benford, Taron Johnson. All I'm telling you is the Bills have operated since last season ended as if they are of the belief that Kaiir Elam is going to be their number 3 outside corner. Now, will they give Jamarcus Ingram or whoever else a chance to beat him out? Sure. You know how much I like Jamarcus Ingram. I'm just saying that I think they will give people opportunity. They have not operated. You say, well, they don't have money. I know, but if they really didn't think the guy could do it, somebody would have been signed somewhere, somehow. They're not going to re-sign Dane Jackson for what he signed for in Carolina. Great for Dane Jackson. Happy for him, right?
Good for him.
But they have done nothing to quell any sort of belief in Kyer, and that's great. They give him the confidence. If it doesn't work out, what happens if Christian Benford misses a game? He's missed a lot of games.
Do you still have the list, the Sharp Football list in front of you of free agents? Go down to cornerbacks because there are some dudes that are still available. The problem is these are guys who would play instead of Christian Benford, which I don't think the Bills are interested in. But what if one of them is just still sitting there? There's some really good corners still available.
Xavier Howard, Adoree Jackson, Stephon Gilmore, Steven Nelson, Patrick Peterson, J.C. Jackson, Ahkello Witherspoon, Keon Crossan. Didn't Keon Crossan play for the Bills? Trey Herndon, Eli Apple. No, thank you. Chandon Sullivan, Fabian Moreau, Jerry Jacobs.
I mean, I don't know. I'm a Christian Benford believer. I think that you need to invest in your young players. But what if one of those guys is like still available? Do you do it?
By the way, Keon Crossan did not play for the Bills. Who am I thinking of? There's a guy. I thought there was a Crossan maybe. I don't know. I think it's a good question. Here's what I think they'll do, Matt. They're going to see this through into August and the first few weeks of training camp and preseason. They'll then make a decision on if Kyer Elam is truly a third boundary corner for them. And if not, that's when they make a decision like that.
That's when they go sign a Xavier Rhodes, or that's when they go sign a what was that guy who was here for like
Kevin
3
Johnson?
or 4 seasons? Kevin Johnson was here, but no, I'm thinking of somebody
Not
a
Josh
year
Norman.
later. No, well, Josh Norman too, but I wasn't thinking of him. What was the guy? EJ Gaines? Was it EJ Gaines who just kept coming back?
Came back? He was traded. He was the guy that came over in the Sammy Watkins trade.
Just like back and forth and back and forth. EJ Gaines. It felt like he was on the team like 3 separate times.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's talk about Bobby Babich and what he had to say when he met with the media for the first time as Bills defensive coordinator.
So Bobby Babich, for the first time since he was hired, we heard from him. And you know what I tweeted when it was done? I don't know if you saw this. This is just strictly off vibes and energy. I just tweeted, I think he's going to be very good at this. Just because I feel like Bobby Babich,
yes,
he's got juice. He's got good answers. Obviously, he's had success on the field. I think he's just approaching all of this in the right way.
So, as a former educator, teaching, I was a teacher in a classroom. And now, isn't your wife a teacher?
School counselor. Close enough.
She works in a school. She's an educator.
Yeah, she
former
teaches
educator.
Stuff too, so yeah.
And somebody who I believe is a current educator, because I think all coaches are educators in some ways, right? And somebody who coached myself at the high school level. Here's what I've always believed: that as long as you can effectively communicate something to someone, you can really educate them, even if they're really not very knowledgeable about it in the first place. And what reason I bring that up with Bobby Babich is, when we listen to him talk, don't you get the feeling that this dude could probably communicate anything he needed to someone who was very, very unknowledgeable about that subject, and that person would get a good grasp of it because of his communication?
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
Right?
Definitely. He could start talking about like linebacker techniques, and I would be like, I'm a linebacker expert.
Yeah,
I think I could go out there and coach these guys up.
100%. That's the kind of guy. I just think he's such a good communicator, which I think goes back to why Sean McDermott made the decision to hire him as defensive coordinator. And of course, he said, this is the place he wants to be and wanted to be, and he landed in the right spot. He had a couple opportunities. He wouldn't divulge exactly which teams, but we know which ones were rumored. It was Miami. It was New York. I think Green Bay was in there. He said he did interview for 2 teams. But look at this guy's track record. Coaching Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer and the DBs and the safeties, I should say, and what they became. And then moving to linebackers. And that first year he goes to linebackers, and Matt Milano becomes an all-pro, and Tremaine Edmonds has a spectacular year and gets paid as the highest linebacker in football. And then, oh, by the way, Terrell Bernard just becomes a guy that I think is on an all-pro track personally.
Yeah, I mean, he's had success at every level of it. And that's another thing that when I talked to Daquan Jones about it, he was like, listen, even though he was behind us and he was coaching different position groups, we still knew his presence and understood kind of what our job was to help his group and vice versa, because this is all one big cycle. It's like everybody help everybody. And if you're doing your job, you're making the other person's job a little bit more, easy to succeed at. So it feels like he's got the support of the team, and it feels like he's got a support of the guys who are now going to be the leaders on this team, because it is very stark. You look out there and it's no Micah Hyde, no Jordan Poyer, no, obviously Matt Milano's injured, but no Tremaine Edmonds, no a lot of these guys, Trey White, who we've seen in the past, but this guy is the one who made Terrell, it's not just him, but he helped Terrell Bernard have an outstanding season. And Terrell Bernard is the name that everybody brings up when you ask, like, who's ready for a bigger role, who's ready to kind of take their game to the next level. So I think that Bobby Babich is going to be good at this. And I think that he had a very strong first impression with his first, press conference as defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I agree. And the mystery of who's going to be calling plays is still not solved. We're not going to know that.
No.
I still believe it will be Bobby Babich. Do you disagree, or do you think it'll be Sean McDermott or Bobby Babich?
I think it'll be Bobby Babich, and I also think that we'll know. I would say we know earlier than we think we will, because I would say, didn't we say that we thought we would find out in the preseason, right?
Well, basically, they said that Sean said it's going to go into training camp, and he may even have like preseason games to kind of do it, to have that opportunity. Mm-hmm. And look, I mean, maybe they really don't know. I'm sure they have an idea of what they want to do, but maybe they truly aren't fully committed because Sean wants to make sure. And I thought Bobby's answer on this was great today, which they asked, if somebody asked, "Are you ready for this?" And it was John Morrow, I believe, said, "Are you ready for this?" And he said, most people, Matt, this is why I think Bobby Babich is a good communicator and honest, and you can, really get some insight on him. I think most people would say, "I've been ready for this my whole life," right? Yeah, I can't wait to blah, 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 do this. I've been preparing my whole life. Yeah, he said, "I've been preparing here," but you never really know if you're ready until you actually do it. You're not ready until you actually do it for the first time. And I thought that was really insightful.
Don't you think that that's like everything in life? Every big moment that happens in life, I don't know if you're ready for it. Are you ready to be married? I don't know, but I'm getting married. Are you ready to be a parent? I don't know. I've never been a parent before, but I guess we're going to have to find out. So it doesn't feel like that's that crazy of a concept. I think knowing that you will at times fail is the right way of approaching it. It's just, how do you respond after you fail? Because there will be times when it will struggle. The defense will struggle, and we'll come on this podcast after a game and say, "Man, Sean McDermott might have to take this over to try and save the season." But if he gets a little bit of a long leash and then they rebound in a nice way, this is a weird analogy, but it's for something that I thought about today, because he really spoke glowingly of Taron Johnson. Everybody does, because he's just such an important player. Remember when Taron Johnson almost was never the nickel cornerback on this team after that injury he had? Remember when Cam Lewis started instead of him? And then
against Kansas City, and then he got hurt that first
Kansas City. Mm-hmm. Like, talk about taking advantage of a second opportunity and never letting it go. I just, for some reason, kept thinking about that today.
Wow, yeah, that's a great point. Bobby Babich, Bill's new DC, but we heard from him, and of course, you can find that at WGR550.com. You can also catch up with Matt and having it WKBW TV and WKBW on their website. I think it's just WKBW.com. Just want to make sure we get that right.
WKBW.com. Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
Did
go ahead.
you
hear
hear
else in this?
Did you hear Stefon Diggs today?
Yeah, we left some time here for a few things. You go. I got a couple things for you. Stefon Diggs. I did hear Stefon Diggs talk about Josh Allen. That's what I heard.
Yeah, so it was pretty boring, to be honest. I listened to the entire 15-minute interview with him. It was much more about, hey, how excited are you to be in Houston? I get it. He's being interviewed by people who cover the Houston Texans. This is very much pertinent to them. That being said, nobody really asked him, like, where did it go wrong or why did it go wrong in Buffalo? They were like, the questions were about Josh Allen and his relationship, which he spoke glowingly about. He basically
Josh
said,
is my guy.
Yeah, I love that guy. I owe a lot of my success to him. Things that you would expect, because listen, like, they were a very lethal combination for 4 years. The only other really interesting nugget was he said he wasn't surprised that he got traded, and he kind of sensed it coming after the coordinator change last year, which, I mean, that's not a surprise either. I have his numbers in front of me because I put together something quick on it. Stefon Diggs once Joe Brady took over as interim OC last year.
Yep.
75 targets, 44 catches,
Mhm.
388 yards, and 1 touchdown. So the numbers plummeted.
And you can look at Khalil Shakir's, and they were, I think, better than that.
Khalil Shakir, 36 targets, 30 catches, 438 yards, 2 touchdowns. So he had fewer
50 more yards.
catches, but he had more yards, another touchdown, and was way more efficient as far as targets is concerned.
Yeah, interesting.
So it felt like Diggs saw this coming.
Your colleague Jeff Russo got to go to the stadium.
Yeah. Wow.
And
I know you and Jared.
I said it last week on here, like, oh my God, this is going to be unbelievable. And then if you watch the story from Jeff Russo, hopefully you could see, because we didn't take any video or pictures. We kind of weren't allowed, and just because of the way the rules were set up. But, Jeff being with TV and having the tour, there's some video. It's amazing.
Yeah, the video is astounding. The video is, if you're somebody who is interested in anything related to the stadium, I really, really enjoyed listening to Sal and Jeremy talk about it. And I know Brayton Wilson went down there as well. And just hearing what you guys thought and the biggest takeaways that you had. And then a week later, getting to put those with all of the video from Jeff Russo and from the photographer who was with him, DL Webster. So shout out to them, because first TV station that went into the stadium and got some awesome video. And I think it really kind of paints the picture of what Sal and Jeremy were talking about, where it feels like the seats are on you. And also just the scale of it. Did you know the steel fact about the Eiffel Tower? Did you see this, or did they tell you this?
They might have, and I forgot, but I don't remember.
There is enough steel going into this new stadium to build 3 Eiffel Towers.
It's crazy, right?
Isn't that crazy? I was like, holy crap.
I would also say, though, I've never actually seen the Eiffel Tower in person. Have you?
I have, yeah.
Okay, so you could get more of a perspective on that than I could.
It's big. Believe it or not, it's big.
Huge.
It's big.
It's
bigger.
It's gonna be fantastic.
Bigger. The Eiffel Tower is like a couple blue water towers stacked up on top of each other.
I love it. Is there just as much traffic around it, though? That's what I want to know, especially during rush hour.
Oh, brutal. I came back from the stadium today, and I always have to decide when I'm coming back from Orchard Park, do I take the 290? Like, do I take the 90 to the 290, or do I take the 190 and go back through the city?
Yep.
And I was at like 5:15. So in my head, then you have a minute to make the decision. Okay, what's going to be less busy? Is it going to be less busy on the 190 going through the city, or is it going to be less busy on the 290? And I always pick wrong. Always.
Today, there's an app that literally will tell you that, right?
It's always like, yeah, but it's
no,
not
even. No, it is. If you go on your map app, it has red and yellow and tells you where the traffic is and says this way is faster.
Sure, but to my point today, I took the 290 way today, and there was an accident, but the accident must have happened 5 minutes before I got there. Yeah. So by the time my decision was made, it would have said green means go, take the 290, and then there's an accident, and then there's a crazy backup. So I always am wrong. Same thing coming off the, we're both Buffalonians, so we say the in front of everything.
Yeah.
Same thing coming off of the 990 when I'm trying to get downtown, because I think both ways are like the same, right? I don't know which way is faster if you're trying to get downtown.
This is a good one. There is a sign that generally gives you the time now, and I don't have to say you have to trust the sign.
Yeah, but sometimes it's not on. Sometimes
I would tell you, anytime it's been on, it's always faster to go 33. To go that way, go left.
I think naturally people go right, so I usually tend to go right.
Yep, me too. I agree 100%. I'm telling you, I believe it's right. It is faster to go the other way. It's faster to go 33. Go by the Blue Water Tower, go 33 that way.
You know what?
Once you get out of 33, it's in.
Yeah, for sure. But for some reason, it feels, my dad used to always tell me this, that it would take him longer. My dad worked in Orchard Park, very close to the stadium, for almost 30 years. And he used to tell me it would take him longer to get from where we lived in Wheatfields to like the Colvin Twin City Highway area than it did to get from there to Orchard Park. And I feel like once you get off the 33, the time it takes to get from the exit of the 33 to the station downtown is like just as long. And that drives me crazy because it's so much more stop and go.
It might matter which side of downtown you want to go to. If you want to just go to, where I don't know, like the Aloft Hotel is, and what do you call it,
Mhm.
Dinosaur Barbecue, versus if you
Sure.
want to go to the stadium, the Bison Stadium, or Your Work, which is right there, like that would be probably
Mhm.
much different.
Yeah, for sure, and that's why I always kind of lean towards
Yeah,
taking the 190 just
yeah.
because you go right down the water, you get off, you loop around behind City Hall, and then you pull into the station.
I have one final question for you. You like that
Okay.
little segue?
Yeah, final.
Do you really care and hold to the fact that it's called NBA Finals, but Stanley Cup Final? Like that is literally the official language of each, and people get upset. This is like British Open versus Open Championship. It is called the Stanley Cup Final. It is called the NBA Finals. Those are the
Mhm.
official names. They are different.
Yeah. No, I don't care, and I almost think that I know they get used interchangeably, and they shouldn't, but they do, so I don't care. I don't even call it the Stanley Cup Final. I just call it the Stanley Cup.
Me too.
Maybe I should be referring to it by
Well, if
its
you're writing an
full name.
article, wouldn't you write Stanley Cup? Wouldn't you write the word final or finals, whatever you do? You wouldn't just say Stanley Cup.
No, I actually just wrote something quick yesterday just because, and it was about all of the former Sabres that will be potentially hoisting the Stanley Cup, and
That's a little different. You're talking about the
I
cup
didn't
itself, not the series.
no, but I didn't put either in it because I didn't know for sure. So I
Okay,
put
it
here
is
the
Stanley
Florida
Cup final. It is
I put
NBA finals.
with the Florida Panthers and Edmonton Oilers meeting in the 2024 Stanley Cup, comma, because I was like, I'm not positive, so I'm gonna just leave it out completely.
Well, now you know because I just told you that. Will you care?
What do you
Will you
want?
now try to hold to it? Because I think we'd both agree that it should be finals. I don't care if they call it final. Why do you call it
Mhm.
final? It's a series. It's a series of games. It's the finals.
Okay. Okay, this is maybe not the perfect comparison, but what do you call the mall that's in Cheektowaga?
Well, it is the Galleria Mall to me, even though that's not the
Which,
official name.
well, that's redundant because they mean the same thing.
That's
So
right.
that you're
That's right.
basically saying the mall or the
That's
Galleria the
right.
Galleria. So Stanley Cup final, Stanley Cup finals. I've listened to. We just said the in front of every possible roadway, throughway option we had. So I am kind of throwing out the actual names out the window. Just call them what everybody else calls them.
Are you who are you picking in the Stanley Cup finals?
Final. Um, I don't know. I don't know. Did you see the stuff from Knobloch today? The comment
I
about
did.
the
I
Buffalo
did.
Bills.
I did. And a little birdie told me that Zach Hyman is gonna have to have a word with him.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't even think
Zach
about
Hyman is
that.
a big Bills fan, and
Huge
the
Bills
coach
fan.
of the Edmonton Oilers said, "Ask the Buffalo Bills what Super Bowl experience means," like referring to being in the Cup final.
Yeah. Um, I think Florida will win. I don't necessarily care who wins. I could kind of make the argument either way. I would like to see McDavid. This might be an unpopular take. I think I'd like to see Edmonton and McDavid win, but at the same time, I'd also like to see Kyle Oposo win.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So I go both ways there. There's a lot of Kyle Oposo hate on social media. People are like, why do people want to root for that guy? The Sabres stunk, and he never was able to fix that. And I'm like, oh,
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
it's a valid point. I just think he's a really nice
I don't think it's
guy.
a valid
So
point at all. What's he supposed to do about it? He was the captain. He wasn't the greatest player. What's he supposed to
mm,
do about it? What? Because
well,
he's wait. He can yell at somebody. It's gonna make him play better. Give me a break.
no, we shouldn't yell at somebody, but I do think that there needed to be somebody that I don't know. I don't know. It's a fascinating thing. How much is the captain actually responsible for? Because if they're not responsible for the failures, then they're not responsible for the success. And I don't
Right,
think
but I
that's
think
right.
you can have captains should be and can be and usually are an integral part of each way, the culture. My point
Mhm.
is though, this guy did nothing but represent Buffalo with class. He had an
I
episode obviously a few years ago
agree
where,
completely.
and he was in the hospital for a little while, but the
Mhm.
guy was nothing but class in Buffalo. Kyle Oposo hate, get out of here with it. Jack Eichel hate, I'm totally fine with it. He was a jackass when he came back to Buffalo, and he showed himself, and he was always kind of like that. It was underneath, and we finally saw it. That's not Kyle Oposo. You don't like the fact that he was in Buffalo. You know what? I'm getting hot about this. I might talk about this on my radio show tomorrow. Thank you for bringing it up because now I'm mad.
I'm glad if you search right now, like Kyle Oposo's name on social media.
After the day I had on social media with people coming at me for videos of simply posting Gable Steveson videos because of the allegations that were against him and things like that. And, posting videos of him at practice and people being upset of simply showing him, like, I'm not going on social media the rest of the night, probably.
Yeah.
Other than to promote this show.
Yes, exactly. And I will retweet you. And I will once again, I've started to do that. I spent a lot of time on, I was proud of myself. I cut my time on my phone last week down by like 33%. I am really trying to avoid social media when I am not like at work, basically.
Okay. It's good. So, good for you.
Trying. It's not going to work, but I'm trying.
All right. We're going to head on out of here. Thanks a lot to Mike Robier, our producer, doing a great job. You didn't give me a pick. You're going to pick one. You think Florida's going to win. Florida's
Panthers
favored.
Are win.
And by the way,
Panthers in 6.
Panthers in 6. Okay. I think you're probably right. They're a deeper team. They're a better team. If Skinner plays like he did for the Oilers, though, it's going to be a little different. I'm rooting for Zach Hyman first. Big Bills fan. Got to know Zach a little bit. I'd love to see that happen. I would love to see McDavid hoist it, but definitely would love to see Oposo and Sam Reinhart win it. That would be really cool. So these are the two teams I wanted in the finals. Now it's kind of like whichever one wins, I'll be happy for that side. Do you have a pick in the NBA real quick? Mavericks, Celtics, NBA finals.
Want the Mavs to win. Think the Celtics will win.
Ooh. I think that sounds right to me, but I think I'll go Mavs, but this is going to be a good series. All right. Well, we'll see what happens in both of these finals series, however you want to call them. Thanks a lot for tuning in. It's always Game Day in Buffalo. We are on YouTube. Thanks a lot. The YouTube numbers are really strong. They're growing. A lot of people coming to watch the podcast, the video part of it. We appreciate that. Sal Sports on YouTube is where you find it. Please subscribe. Always growing the subscriber count, but more than anything, just kind of watch the show. We'd love that. And of course, if you just want to listen on audio, you're bumping around like Matt says in the commercial that runs on WGR. When he's doing laundry, he just listens to the podcast that creates 25 hours in a day. It's exactly what happens. So we invite you to do that as well. Matt, you and I will talk a little bit down the road, maybe later this week. The next time it is, though, and it's always Game Day in Buffalo.